for Geoffrey of Monmouth's conception of a shrine to Janus, who I'm suggesting should be read as the horned hunting god, at Leicester. Well, I picked up this pamphlet, Vestiges of Paganism in Leicestershire by Charles Bilson, a 19th century folklorist. And I scoured it for any mention of Janus or anything like him at Leicester. And I only found one thing, but I think it could be important. It seems there was a Leicester legend of someone called Black Anna, or Cat Anna, who was a kind of bogey woman, the sort of thing that you'd say to children to frighten them. Don't go down there because Black Anna will get you. And she was associated with a cave in the Dane Hills area of Leicester, Black Anna's Bower, which is now covered over by a housing estate. And something I find particularly intriguing, there was a ritual hunt that started at Black Anna's Bower every Easter. Well, let's unpick this a bit. We've got Anna in the Dane Hills. So Anna, Dane, is this related to Anna, Dana, the Celtic goddess, who's possibly the same as Jana, Diana, the female counterpart of Janus? Well, most modern Leicester folklorists are very sceptical about any link between Black Anna and a pagan goddess. And there are other suggestions, for example, that she's based on Agnes, a medieval hermit who's commemorated in the church at Swithland, near Leicester, and that the Dane Hills take their name from Danet, the landowner who happened to own them. Well, these ideas are possible, but at the end of the day they are just speculations without any concrete evidence. And what's more, they completely ignore some important details. You see, why Black Anna? Why Cat Anna? Why a ritual hunt? And why Easter? But if we accept the possibility of a link between Black Anna and Diana, then we'll find that these things fall naturally into place. For example, the ritual hunt makes sense because Diana was the goddess of hunting. Well, let's go back to man, myth and magic to see what else we can find out about Diana. So let's look up Diana. Here we go. There's quite a long article about Diana. Most of it's the classical mythology, but I want to draw attention to this last section, which is headed Witch Goddess. Greek and Roman authors connected witches with darkness and night, and so with Diana as goddess of the moon. As a pagan goddess and patroness of witches, to the early Christians Diana was a demon, and traces of her in this capacity survived into the Middle Ages. The most famous survival was the belief that witches flew through the night with Diana. Well, let's go and think about this. So Diana is a goddess of witches, of black magic, which could explain Black Anna. And in his Greek myths, Robert Graves reminds us that Diana could turn herself into a cat. And cats are, of course, very much associated with witches, so that could explain Cat Anna. And it's interesting that the church turned Diana into a demon the same way it turned the horned god into the devil, because that reinforces the idea that the horned god is Diana's male counterpart, Janus. And some Googling of all this brings up information about the Italian witchcraft tradition of Stregoria, which also calls itself La Vecchia Religione, the old religion, and claims to go back to pre-Roman times. And in this Stregoria there is a moon goddess and a horned god, and they're given various names, but one of the pairs of names for them is Jana and Janus. Now there are those who say that Stregoria and its English equivalent Wicca were invented by a series of charlatans, but even if true, it's reassuring that they came to similar conclusions about the equivalence between Janus and the horned god. And finally there's this issue of Black Anna's ritual hunt being at Easter. If we're talking about Jana, the female counterpart of Janus, we might expect it to be at New Year. Well, Theodore Gaster, in his book on New Year, points out that having the New Year in the middle of winter is a relatively recent convention, and in the past New Year was more frequently celebrated in spring, i.e. around Easter time. So this Easter hunt could be interpreted as a New Year ritual. And the Venerable Bede, the historian, tells us that the word Easter comes from a goddess called Easter. Now the skeptics point out that Bede is our only source for this goddess. Here's Hutton again, suggesting that the Anglo-Saxon Easter month simply meant the month of beginnings, and Bede mistakenly connected it with a goddess who never existed. But it seems very arrogant to dismiss Bede so lightly. Why should we know better than him? Besides, there is other evidence for a goddess called Easter. Admittedly, it's from the Middle East, and the name is slightly different. The Mesopotamian goddess Ishtar. But Ishtar, Easter, it's very close. And we know that the Indo-European family of languages spread from Ireland to India in ancient times, so it's not impossible that cultural ideas like the name of a goddess could have been carried over similar distances. After all, Bede himself followed a religion that had begun in the Middle East. And I wouldn't make so much of this if it weren't that Ishtar was also known as Inanna, which brings us back to the name element found in the Celtic goddess Anna, Dana, or the Roman Jana, Diana. And in fact, classical authors did equate Inanna with Diana. So the goddess Inanna/Ishtar seems to connect Diana and Easter as alternative names for a goddess of the new year. And so if we interpret Black Anna as a memory of the pagan Diana, all the elements of her legend begin to make sense. We've got Diana, the goddess of witches, of black magic, so Black Anna, the goddess who turned herself into a cat, so Cat Anna, the goddess of hunting, the ritual hunt, and the goddess of New Year, and this ritual hunt taking place at Easter, which was, in those days, the New Year. So with the legend of Black Anna, we do seem to have some memory of a Diana cult at Leicester. Now, of course, that's Diana rather than Janus, which is what we were looking for, but Diana is the female counterpart of Janus, and if there was a cult of Diana at Leicester, then it would have made sense for there to have been a parallel cult of Janus. So, we come back to Geoffrey of Monmouth and his statement that there was an ancient British shrine to Janus at Leicester. Well, when we trust Geoffrey enough to investigate what he's saying, it actually checks out in all sorts of ways, and we get tantalisingly close to a memory at Leicester of the Janus cult itself. Now, I'm not saying that I've proved Geoffrey to be correct. The evidence I've been presenting is circumstantial, but the alternative sceptical view is just as speculative, and actually explains far less. So it would be a reasonable working assumption that Geoffrey's account of King Lear contains some historical truth. And let's remember exactly what Geoffrey says. Lear's daughter Cordelia buried her father in this underground chamber constructed in honour of Janus. So if there is a shrine to Janus at Leicester, it's also the tomb of King Lear. Find the shrine, and you find the remains of a mighty Bronze Age king. Imagine that.